Last night on Fox News, a fiery clash erupted as Chris Rock, comedy legend, took on Karoline Leavitt, the sharp-tongued 27-year-old White House press secretary. Sparks flew, jokes landed, and truth was tested in a showdown that left the audience stunned. The stage was set for a collision of worlds. Chris Rock, known for his biting humor and unfiltered takes, versus Karoline Leavitt, a rising political star with a reputation for fierce loyalty to the Trump administration. The Fox News studio buzzed with anticipation as the two sat across from each other, the tension palpable even before the host, Hannity, introduced them. The crowd, a mix of conservative stalwarts and curious onlookers, leaned forward, sensing a battle was about to unfold. Rock, dressed in a sleek black blazer, flashed his signature grin, but his eyes were sharp, ready to strike. Leavitt, poised in a crisp navy suit, sat with a steely gaze, her notes neatly stacked, betraying no hint of intimidation. Hannity barely finished his opening when Rock launched his first salvo. "All right, let's talk about Melania," Rock began, his voice dripping with mischief. "She's out here living like a luxury prisoner in that White House. I mean, come on, she's got the best handcuffs money can buy, right?" The audience erupted in laughter, some clapping, others gasping at the audacity. Rock leaned back, savoring the reaction, his grin widening as he continued. "You ever see her smile? That's not a smile, that's a cry for help. She's like, 'Get me out of this penthouse jail.'" The crowd roared again, feeding off his energy, but Leavitt's expression didn't crack. She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint, calculated smile, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Hannity turned to Leavitt, giving her the floor. She didn't hesitate. "Chris, I get it. You're a comedian. You tell jokes," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "But let's stick to facts. Melania Trump was a dedicated first lady who championed children's education and fought against her opioid addiction. She didn't just sit in some gilded cage, as you put it. She worked hard. Maybe you missed that while you were workshopping your stand-up routine." The audience murmured, a few clapping in approval. Rock's grin faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly, leaning forward with a mock-serious nod. "Oh, I see, we're doing facts now," Rock shot back. "Okay, fact. Melania's book just dropped, and it's selling like clearance rack at Macy's. Fact, she's barely seen in public unless it's a photo op. You telling me that's a dedicated first lady?" "Come on, Karoline, even you don't believe that." The crowd laughed again, but Leavitt was unfazed. She flipped open her notes, her movements deliberate, and began rattling off statistics. Melania's Be Best campaign reached millions. Her hospital visits logged countless hours. Her international trips strengthened diplomatic ties. Each point landed like a jab, precise and unrelenting. Rock tried to interrupt with a quip. "Yeah, but did she ever look happy doing it?" The audience chuckled, but Leavitt didn't flinch. "Happiness isn't the job, Chris. Service is. You'd know that if you ever stepped out of your comedy bubble." The room went quiet, the air thick with tension. Hannity, sensing the moment, leaned in, egging them on. "This is getting good," he said, smirking. The crowd buzzed, split between those cheering Leavitt's poise and others waiting for Rock to hit back harder. Rock, never one to back down, doubled down. "Service? Karoline, you're out here serving Trump's tweets like they're gospel. You're 27. You should be out living, not defending a guy who thinks Melania's job is to look pretty and wave." The audience gasped, some booing, others laughing nervously. Leavitt's eyes narrowed, and for the first time a flicker of anger crossed her face. She leaned forward, her voice low but venomous. "You call yourself a truth-teller, Chris, but you're just a failed comedian peddling cheap shots. You don't know Melania, and you don't know service. Stick to your Netflix specials." The crowd erupted, some chanting her name, others shouting for Rock to respond. Rock's jaw tightened, his cool demeanor cracking. He opened his mouth to fire back, but Leavitt was already rolling, her words sharp and unrelenting, dismantling his jokes with a surgeon's precision. The audience was hers now, and Rock knew it. His eyes darted to the crowd, then back to her, the weight of the moment sinking in. This wasn't just a debate, it was a massacre, and he was bleeding. Leavitt pressed her advantage, her voice steady, but laced with disdain. You see, Chris, the problem with people like you is you think a punchline is a personality. You mock Melania, but what have you built? A couple of specials? A few laughs? She's been in rooms you'll never step foot in, making decisions that actually matter. The audience roared, clapping wildly, some standing in their seats. Hannity raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the carnage, but stayed silent, letting Leavitt's words hang in the air. Rock's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles whitening. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not by someone half his age. He forced a laugh, trying to reclaim the room. Oh, Karoline, you're good, I'll give you that. You've got the whole angry intern vibe down pat. But let's be real. You're not here defending Melania. You're defending a brand. Trump's brand. And that brand's sinking faster than my last movie. A few laughs rippled through the crowd, but they were weaker now, hesitant. Leavitt's supporters booed, their voices drowning out the chuckles. Rock's smirk wavered, but he pushed on. You're out here acting like Melania's some saint, but we all saw her jacket, right? I really don't care, do you? That's not service, that's shade. Leavitt didn't blink. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her composure unshaken. You want to talk about that jacket? Let's. It was a message to the media, to people like you who twist everything for a laugh. Melania wore it to call out the noise, and you fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. You're not exposing truth, Chris. You're just adding to the chaos. The crowd erupted again, some shouting, Karoline, as if she'd just landed a knockout blow. Rock's eyes widened, his confidence unraveling. He hadn't expected her to turn the jacket controversy into a weapon, but she wielded it with devastating ease. Hannity finally jumped in, sensing Rock needed a lifeline. All right, Chris, you've got a chance to respond. What's your take? Is Leavitt right, or are you still standing by your luxury prisoner bit? The question was a trap, and Rock knew it. If he doubled down, he risked alienating the room further. If he backed off, he'd look weak. He took a deep breath, his mind racing for a comeback that could shift the momentum. Listen, Sean, Rock started, his voice lower, more deliberate. I'm not here to tear down Melania. I'm here to talk about what we all see. She's married to a guy who's tweeting at 3 a.m., starting fights with everybody. You think that's easy? I'm saying she's trapped, not because she's weak, but because that's the deal she signed up for. And Karoline, you can spin it all you want, but you're trapped too, defending a man who doesn't even know your name. The audience gasped, a mix of cheers and boos filling the studio. It was a bold move, personal and cutting, and for a moment it seemed like Rock might claw his way back. But Leavitt was ready. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. You're wrong. Chris, I'm not trapped. I'm here because I believe in what we're doing. Melania believes in it too. You call it a deal? I call it duty. You wouldn't understand that, because your only duty is to your ego. The crowd went wild, their applause shaking the studio. Rock's face froze, his mouth open but no words coming out. He'd walked into her trap, and she'd closed it around him. Hannity tried to steer the conversation, but the energy was all Leavitt's. She kept going, her voice rising with conviction. You mock duty, Chris, but Melania's been to war, zones, met with world leaders, stood up for kids nobody else cared about. What's your legacy? A joke about a jacket? You're not speaking truth. You're just loud. The audience was on its feet, their cheers deafening. Rock's eyes darted to the exit, his cool completely gone. He was drowning, and Leavitt was holding his head under. The room felt smaller, the lights hotter, as her words kept coming, each one a dagger aimed at his pride. Rock's hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm inside him. He'd faced tough crowds before, but this was different. Leavitt wasn't just winning. She was rewriting the narrative, turning his years of sharp-witted comedy into a punchline. The audience, once his ally, now hung on her every word. Their applause a wall he couldn't break through. Hannity, sensing the imbalance, tossed him a rope. "Chris, come on. You're not going to let that stand, are you? Give us something!" His tone was goading, almost mocking, and it stung. Rock's eyes flicked to Hannity, then back to Leavitt, who sat back with a serene confidence, her hands folded, waiting for his next misstep. He forced a chuckle, leaning forward, his voice hoarse but defiant. "All right, Karoline, you want to talk legacy? Let's talk. I've been making people laugh for 30 years, speaking truth to power while you were still in diapers. I've called out presidents, CEOs, everybody. You? You're just a mouthpiece for a guy who can't spell duty. So don't lecture me about legacy." The crowd stirred, a few cheers breaking through, but they were drowned out by boos. Leavitt's supporters were relentless, their loyalty unshakable. Rock's jab landed, but it lacked the venom to turn the tide. Leavitt didn't flinch. She tilted her head, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. 30 years, Chris? That's a long time to say nothing. You call it truth, but it's just noise. You've made millions mocking people, but what have you fixed? Melania's out there building bridges. You're just burning them. The audience exploded, their cheers shaking the studio. She wasn't just debating. She was dismantling him piece by piece, and the crowd loved it. Rock's face twitched, his usual swagger replaced by something raw, almost desperate. He opened his mouth, but Leavitt cut him off, her voice like a blade. "And let's not pretend you're some rebel, Chris," she continued, her eyes locked on his. "You're a brand too, just like you accused me of being. You play the truth-teller on stage, but you're cashing checks from the same system you claim to hate. At least I'm honest about my loyalty." The crowd gasped, then roared, some chanting her name. Rock's eyes widened, his breath catching. She'd turned his own attack against him, and the precision was brutal. Hannity leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips, letting the chaos unfold. Rock slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the studio. "Honest? You call that honest?" he snapped, his voice cracking with frustration. "You're out here spinning lies for a man who'd throw you under the bus in a heartbeat. Melania's not building bridges, she's hiding behind them, and you're helping her do it." The audience split, half cheering, half booing, the room a cauldron of noise. For a moment Rock seemed to regain his footing, his passion reigniting, the spark that had made him a legend. But Leavitt was unmoved, her gaze cold and unyielding. She leaned forward, her voice low, almost intimate, but dripping with contempt. "You're angry, Chris. I get it. It's hard when the room sees through you. But don't take it out on me or Melania. We're doing the work. You're just yelling about it." The audience erupted again, their applause a tidal wave. Rock's shoulders slumped, his energy draining. He looked at the crowd, their faces a blur of judgment, then at Leavitt, who sat like a queen on a throne of facts. Hannity tried to jump in, but Rock waved him off, his voice barely audible. "You think you've won this, don't you?" he muttered, his eyes burning with defiance. Leavitt's smile widened, but her words were ice. "It's not about winning, Chris. It's about truth. And you're running out of it." The crowd roared, their loyalty hers alone. Rock's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. The stage felt like a cage, and he was cornered, his every move watched, judged, and shredded. The air crackled. With tension, the next moment teetering on a knife's edge, Rock's eyes burned with a mix of fury and desperation. He'd built a career on owning the room, but now the room owned him. Leavitt's words echoed in his head, each one a barb sinking deeper. The audience, once his playground, was now her army, their cheers a relentless assault. Hannity, sensing the tipping point, leaned forward, his voice slick with provocation. "Chris, you're not just gonna sit there, are you? You've got a reputation to defend." The challenge hung heavy, daring Rock to swing back or crumble. Every second of silence felt like surrender, and Rock knew it. He rose slightly in his chair, his voice raw, almost trembling with intensity. "You want to talk truth, Karoline? Fine. Truth is, Melania's a prop in a circus, and you're the ringmaster's assistant, selling tickets to a show nobody believes in anymore. You're not fooling anyone with your stats and your spin. This whole thing, Trump, Melania, it's a con, and I'm calling it out." The crowd gasped, a few cheers breaking through. But the boos were louder, a tidal wave of disapproval. Rock's words were fire, but they were burning him too. His defiance costing him the last scraps of goodwill. Leavitt's eyes narrowed, her composure unshaken, but her tone sharper, like a blade being unsheathed. "A con, Chris? That's rich coming from a man who's made a fortune selling outrage. You call Melania a prop, but you're the one performing, throwing tantrums for clout. I deal in reality, her work, her impact, her sacrifice. You deal in cheap shots and applause lines. Which one's the real con?" The audience erupted, their applause thunderous, some standing to chant her name. Leavitt's words were a masterclass in redirection, turning Rock's attack into a mirror that exposed his own flaws. Hannity's smirk widened, his eyes darting, between them like a referee at a prize fight. Rock's chest heaved, his breath uneven. He pointed a finger at Leavitt, his voice rising to a shout. "Sacrifice? You're out here talking about sacrifice? Melania's sacrifice is living in a golden penthouse while the rest of us deal with the mess your boss made. And you, Karoline, you're sacrificing your integrity every time you stand at that podium and lie for him." The crowd split, half roaring in support, half jeering, the studio a cauldron of chaos. For a fleeting moment, Rock's passion seemed to pull the room back, his raw emotion cutting through Leavitt's polished armor. But it was a fleeting victory, and he felt it slipping. Leavitt leaned forward, her voice low but venomous, each word deliberate. "You're loud, Chris, but you're not right. Melania's been in the trenches, hospitals, disaster zones, places you'd never go because there's no stage for your ego. And me? I stand at that podium because I believe in something bigger than myself. You only believe in the sound of your own voice." The crowd exploded, their cheers shaking the rafters. Leavitt's gaze never left Rock's, her confidence a wall he couldn't breach. She wasn't just winning, she was rewriting the rules of the game, and Rock was playing catch-up. Hannity tried to interject, but the crowd's energy drowned him out. Rock's face twisted, his fists unclenching only to clench again. He looked at the audience, their faces a sea of judgment, then at Leavitt, who sat like a general after a rout. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" He spat, his voice thick with frustration. "You think you can just sit there all smug and bury me? I've been through worse than you, kid." It was a last-ditch swing, but it lacked precision, and Leavitt pounced. "Untouchable? No, Chris, I'm just prepared. You came here with jokes. I came with facts. That's why you're losing." The audience roared, their loyalty cemented. Rock's eyes flickered to the exit again, his body tense, like a trapped animal. The stage was no longer his, and the weight of that truth was crushing. Leavitt's words hung in the air, final and unyielding, as the crowd waited for his next move. Their anticipation a palpable force. Rock's breath came in short, ragged bursts, his mind scrambling for a lifeline. He'd faced hecklers, critics, and cancellations, but this was different. Leavitt had stripped him bare, turning his own weapons against him. The audience, once his lifeblood, now stared with a mix of pity and scorn, their allegiance fully hers. Hannity, sensing the endgame, leaned in, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Chris, you've got one last shot. Anything to say, or are you tapping out?" The question was a taunt, a final nail, and Rock's eyes blazed with defiance. He wasn't going down without a fight, even if it was a losing one. He stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, drawing every eye in the studio. "You know what, Karoline?" he said, his voice low but shaking with raw emotion. "You're good. Real good. You've got your facts, your stats, your shiny little script. But here's the thing. People don't laugh at facts. They laugh at truth. And the truth is, Melania's miserable, Trump's a mess, and you're out here polishing a sinking ship. I don't need your applause to know I'm right." A few claps broke out, scattered but defiant, from those still loyal to his fire, but the boos were louder, a crushing wave that threatened to swallow him whole. Leavitt didn't hesitate, rising to meet him, her posture unyielding. "Truth, Chris? You wouldn't know it if it slapped you. You call Melania miserable because it fits your act, but you've never met her, never seen her work. I have. I've seen her fight for kids, for families, for this country, while you're out there chasing laughs and headlines. You're not a truth-teller. You're a performer, and this stage just exposed you." The crowd erupted, their cheers a deafening roar, some pounding their fists on their seats. Leavitt's voice cut through the noise, steady and triumphant. "You can walk away, Chris, but you can't walk away from reality." Rock's face contorted, a mix of rage and resignation. He pointed at her, his finger trembling. "Reality? Your reality's a fantasy, Karoline. You're selling a dream that's already dead, and you're too young to see it. Keep your facts. I'm done here." The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath as Rock tore off his mic, the feedback screeching through the studio. He turned to Hannity, his voice a bitter snarl. "Thanks for the setup, Sean. Real classy." Then, with a final glare at Leavitt, he stormed toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The crowd exploded into chaos, some chanting Leavitt's name, others shouting after Rock, a mix of jeers and pleas. Leavitt stood motionless, her expression calm but victorious, like a warrior who'd slain her foe without breaking a sweat. Hannity scrambled to regain control, his voice booming. "Well, folks, that's one for the history books. Karoline Leavitt, ladies and gentlemen." The applause was thunderous, a tidal wave of adoration that followed Rock out the door. He didn't look back, his silhouette vanishing into the shadows of the studio hallway, the weight of his defeat heavier than any punchline he'd ever delivered. Leavitt sat down, smoothing her suit, her smile faint but unshakable. The stage was hers, the narrative hers, the victory hers. The audience, still buzzing, hung on her every move, their faith in her cemented. Hannity turned to her, his tone almost reverent. "Karoline, you took on a legend and came out on top. How do you feel?" She leaned forward, her voice clear and resolute. "I feel like the truth won tonight, Sean. That's all that matters." The crowd roared one final time, their cheers carrying the weight of a battle won, a comedian humbled, and a young press secretary crowned. The lights dimmed, the show ended, and Leavitt's triumph echoed beyond the studio, a story of wit, will, and unyielding conviction that would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling.